Hello, everybody. My name's John Murray, and I'm here with Andrew Howard and a posse of us from Moray Estates. We've come a long way. Morayshire and Invernessshire is other end of the country from here, obviously, but it's a very special area. Probably a lot of you know the Highlands. It has a particular character and personality that perhaps shares some parallels with Dorset. The story for us started in 2002, and the two senior members of Highland Council, based in Inverness, which is there, requested to come and see Andrew and I in the office. So that's 18 years ago, and they appeared fairly out of the blue and wanted to discuss with us the problems that they were and the criticism that they were suffering as a result of Inverness having sprawled in a very hectic and unplanned way over the course of the 1980s and 1990s. And they were looking for ideas and inspiration as to how they could remedy this for their plans in the future. And the reason they came to us was that this area of ground here is part of Moray Estates, and it is obviously just to the east of Inverness, and it's equidistant between Inverness and Nairn, which is the next town to the east, and this is the Moray Firth and the North Sea beyond it. And so they initially had this idea of having 6 new dormitory villages between Inverness and Nairn, each of about 3,000 inhabitants, and interconnect with a whole sort of funny spaghetti of interconnecting roadways. And 3 of those communities would have been on us. So with that, they left Andrew and I to kind of pick up the pieces and make some kind of sense of it. This is typical of the sort of the kind of development that's been going on around Inverness in the 1980s and 1990s, and I hasten to say, I'm afraid, right up to today. The ideal is for some people is to have a bungalow with a 1.8 meter fence around it, so that you can't see your neighbours, and just replicate that in a manner not dissimilar to one of the slides that Ben's just put up. And it has an awful parallel with a lot of what's going on, well, in the United States and many other parts of the world. But these disconnected suburbs, miles from the centre of town, no sense of community, no sense of walkability. And this is in the Highlands of Scotland, which is, famous for a great sense of community in a traditional sense. The first thing Andrew and I, having sort of learnt of this or praised ourselves of this problem, was to go off and have a look at what we knew we liked in Scotland. So one of our favourite places is a place called Dunkeld, which is just north of Perth, and it's just a really idyllic, planned 18th century village, planned by the Duke of Atholl at the time. And again, the housing here, there's nothing special about it. It's just, there's nothing complicated about the way it's built. It's just the juxtaposition of the houses and the sense of community and neighbourhood that all engenders. Another place was Cromarty, which is a less well-known village, but absolutely idyllic, just to the north of Inverness, which was frozen in time in the 18th century, and it's again the architecture there's nothing complicated about it. There's nothing that we thought that you couldn't show to a local house builder and that they couldn't replicate in one way or another. We went further afield. We went down to the garden cities mostly the southeast of England. That's Hampstead Gardens suburb, and Welwyn. We particularly liked Letchworth, which was perhaps more applicable to a Scottish context. And of course, we came to Poundbury in was probably about 1994 was the first visit here. That's Brookhouse Street, and phase 1 Poundbury had been finished at that point. You know, we were fascinated by, for example, that tree, which we've been looking at for the last 18 years, and it's just plonked in the middle of the street. And what a great tree it is. We always come and pay homage to it, and it's a great traffic calming device. And why not have a tree as opposed to a horrid sort of bollard or something? We then went back again closer to home. That's the new town of Edinburgh, and that area to the west is the Moray estate in Edinburgh. Moray Place, Ainsley Place, Great Stewart Street, and this was developed by the 10th Earl of Moray in the early 19th century, and is apparently the longest sort of Regency thoroughfare in Europe. But that was an inspiration to us in the sense that we'd always been aware of it, and that this history of town planning, well, it was certainly an example of town planning that's endured and fulfills the same purpose that it was built for in the 1820s. We went on to all over the world, actually. I think we got a bit carried away. One thing, it was great fun. I can't tell you what fun we had. Denmark, Netherlands, USA, Italy, Spain, the list goes on, actually. And we had a fascinating time. And the place in the middle there, for example, is Kentlands in Maryland. And we met the founder of Kentlands, who was a chap called Joe Alfandri, who drove around in his pickup with a 10-gallon hat. And he knew everybody. Everybody say, you know, hi, Joe, and he'd say, oh, hi, Mr. Smith, and seemed to know everybody in the town. And I remember thinking at that point, will we ever be in a position where we have our own town, where we can go and wave to everybody and say hi? At that point, I thought probably not, actually, but didn't stop us having a lot of fascinating time. By 2004, we began to formulate a clearer idea of what we had in mind. And it became very apparent that 3 communities of 3,000 was completely the wrong way to go for all sorts of reasons, from sustainability to lack of economies of scale and so many other reasons. And we rationalized those 3 communities of 3,000 into one community of 10,000, and equidistant between Inverness and Nairn, and just to the south of Inverness Airport, which is right here, and just off the arterial trunk road, the A96, and the railway between Inverness and Aberdeen. It seemed like it was a very obvious and clear place to have the make our proposal. At the same time, we started thinking about guiding principles and what we wanted out of it, and what we thought the neighbourhood and the region would want out of it. And one of the most important points was quality. We know the Edinburgh New Town well, and enduring quality we felt was something that could only be really achieved if we retained a long-term interest in the project. And that was to decide not to sell out to a mass house builder, which is what was going on around Inverness, and to not take a development partner either. That was a very big decision for us, that we decided we'd do it ourselves and using our own resources. And we'd already spent about £250,000 up to that point on quite a lot of plane tickets, probably, actually, truth be told, and hotel bills. But the other benefit of long-term interest was to retain control in it, and to retain control in the quality of it. And also, there was quite a lot of evidence that the longer you had a relationship with the development, the greater you could reap the benefits of the increase in value as the development was built out. That most of the value accrued towards the end of the development, particularly with a new urbanist approach. So that was us in 2006, and from that we decided to go along the charrette route, which is equivalent of an inquiry by design. We were introduced to the legendary Andres Duany from DPZ in Miami, and he was. We met him through our trips in the United States, and we got on with him very well. We didn't expect him to really want to work in Scotland, but actually he had a Scottish granny, and it was always his dream to do a Scottish project. So he was thrilled to come and work on Tornagrain. That was back in September 2006, and this was an aerial view of the site in 2006, and that we identified, which is about 640 acres. Most of the open ground you can see in front of you there. It was all in. The land was all in hand. We were farming it. It was accessible to us, and it was luckily also the area of land most suited on the estate to a new development. The other point, which was interesting, is it's a standalone greenfield site, so it's not contiguous to an existing community. It's a brand new community, and which has disadvantages and advantages. Advantages in the sense that there's not an us and them, which I think sometimes occurs when you build something radically different on an existing community. As it's happened, the inhabitants are incredibly proud of it already, and it has a very strong identity, even within the last couple of years has developed. The downside is that we've had to put in a lot of services that we might have been able to piggyback on had it been contiguous to something existing. Anyway, in September 2006, Andres and his team came over from Miami, and we had this momentous 10-day charrette in a local hotel in Inverness. There is a familiar figure in the bottom left who we met on that fateful September in 2006. That's Ben, who I have to say was a force of nature and created undoubtedly the best and most beautiful drawings for the charrette on that period. And so it's been a great pleasure to have stayed very much in touch with Ben ever since then. Over the course of the charrette, 600 members of the local community passed through, and we had NGOs there, local politicians, councillors, the roads department. They had a fit because we redesigned the trunk road to bypass this non-existent community, and suddenly there was politicians from Edinburgh ringing up, having apoplectic fits about whatever it was we were up to. But it all worked incredibly well at the end of the day. And this was the end master plan, and as drawn up by DPZ. And that's the A96, the trunk road running through here. Airport's up to the north. This is the high street as we envisaged it at the time, and it was a community of 12,000 anticipated 12,000, 14,000 people, with a build out of something in the region of 50 years, 5,000 homes. So we envisaged about 100 a year for 50 years. So that's phase one, isolated from the master plan. And this is where we've actually started. The services went in 2015, but this is what we ended up being the first area that we ended up delivering. The master plan went through many different iterations, and huge amount of analysis into housing densities and housing transects. Densities rising as you reach the centre of the town, and more of a suburban atmosphere or character around the edge, and walkable neighbourhood centres, which is so important and so integral to new urbanism. So there's five neighbourhood centres, each focused on a neighbourhood centre with a primary school, maybe a pub, a shop. Some features that will really anchor the community within each neighbourhood, and no house further than 5-minute walk from a neighbourhood centre. So in theory, you can live in the town without any need of a car. So then we had to decide, the next fun thing was to decide what sort of architecture we were going to go for. We had a completely open slate, really. We'd accepted new urbanism as a concept, but it was the architectural style that we were focusing on at this point. And in the end, we realized we didn't have to go any further than our own backyard. We have an estate architecture at home, very characteristic of the northeast, and wonderful building examples from towns and villages all over Scotland and England. And so we pasted these up in great big mood boards. Again, this was great. It was really good fun. But Ben was sort of orchestrating it all. This is back in, 2006, 2007. And trying to identify parts of the town with certain characteristics and that would be appropriate for different types of architectural styles, but all within this common Scottish vernacular domestic architecture that we felt was deliverable. It looked attractive, it wouldn't scare the builders off, and it wasn't too expensive to deliver. So this is finally in 2015 that we started putting in services. Incidentally, it took, after the charrette, it took another 4 years to get planning consent. Agonizing process. There were huge periods where we really didn't progress things at all because we had to align ourselves with local structure plans and God knows what else. We only had 50 objections to the whole project, which was tiny in comparison to to what we expected, and so there was no real opposition. The local politicians were keen on it, MPs, councillors, and yet it still took a very, very long time. So by 2015, we were putting in services, and as a developer, we use subcontractors to put in work away with the electricity in the foul and storm drainage and all the rest of it. And by 2017, we were completing the first house, and the first family moved in, the Hewitts, in April 2017, and this is the main road through that subphase that was designed by Ben Pentreath and his team, and we've been absolutely thrilled with it. It's exactly what we'd hoped. It's got, he's making use of the slope. He's got the foreshortening effect of building houses in a curve, both laterally and vertically. Interesting. This was a key bit of our sort of DNA and statement of intent. It's a little square called Malvina Green, named after my mother, and everyone has bees in their bonnets. My particular one is porches. I think they're incredibly valued part of any kind of a development, and that they're very big in our part of the world. They act as a wonderful arbitrage between the public and the private. And these are knotty spruce porches are particularly characteristic with us. So we've inserted them. We have them on the estate from buildings of 150 years ago. And so we've been sourcing these and putting them incorporating them into the porches. So naughty spruce is now very hard to get hold of. Or as we say, it's naughty but nice. Anyway, and here is parking is a challenge. I mean, we have endless issues with trying to accommodate an attractive design and a tight urbanism with the demands of the local authority with regard to parking. We have rear lanes, which are designed to minimise the impact on the primary streets and also on the architectural character. But it's not easy. We have a broad mix of buildings and homes in the development. There's 25% social housing, which we're fine about, but it's tenure blind, so we're not stigmatizing anyone in social housing by ghettoizing them. You can't differentiate between a social house and a private house. Social housing is a mix of mid-market rent, social rent, and split private equity with a local authority, and but a mixture of one-bedroom flats to four-bedroom family houses. We also have retail in the neighbourhood centres. That's about to open as a chemist, as a pharmacy. We also have a Pilates studio, and a village store opened about 3 or 4 days ago, absolutely stuffed full of sweets and iron brew, which is it's all my favourite things. And there's the greenery is just of paramount importance. The landscaping, we've got landscape trees, which again, everything is can be a headache. I mean, to put one tree in a silver cell root cage in a hard surface in a pavement or a street in our part of the world costs £10,000, which is just eye-watering, really. So we're trying to confine the trees to green spaces in public areas where it's not so onerous. So moving on, it's just amazing that this has all appeared in 2 years. The houses have been selling like hotcakes. We've sold 25 this year already. Most of the people are young. A lot of people are young families coming out of Inverness, and you ask them why they like Tornagrain, and it's just very, very simple. They feel very at home there. They love the architecture. They love living in a period house without the problems of living in a period house. So that they have ensuite bathrooms, of well insulated, high EPC values, low heating costs. And my wife Kathy does the social media and keeps an eye on the community Facebook page, and they're already voraciously proud and possessive of the community. They're very, very proud, very, very already there's a tremendous community feeling, which makes us feel very, very pleased. That's the Pilates studio there. That's Pilates. That's the store. This is just an amazing example of Ben's. It would never have occurred to me not to centralise that building on the street, but Ben's actually obviously deliberately moved it off to the side, which works so well, and it gives you this vista down Loch-and-Dinty Road down to the right, and just adds to the complexity and delight of the whole place. And so it goes on. That's our little school that we built. It's a preschool, and it's the first outdoor nursery in Scotland. So we almost didn't have to build the school because they're never in it, and they stay in the wood there, doing whatever they do up there. And as a commercial building, we're retaining all the commercial buildings, and so the shops and offices that we are planning retained within Moray Estates as a way of having a long-term value and stake in the community. We may possibly deliver some social housing in the future as well, which again would help us retain an interest. Allotments, Davies Shed. The allotments have been very popular. They're all full. We're working on where to put the next lot of allotments, and Ben's already given us some great ideas in the last couple of days. So now I'll hand you over to Andrew Howard, who will just say 1 or 2 words.
Thank you, John. John's told us I suppose, about the why and the how, although given we've got some of our board here today, I'm not sure he needed to tell them all about the foreign travel. Something else has made more sense to me today as well, and that's that Ben's not very good at maths. That now explains his fee notes. He's obviously hitting the zero more often than he thinks he is. You can sort of take for granted that we're interested in things like beauty and stewardship, but we're learning a lot of practical lessons in this project. It's 170 years since the estate built a new town, which was a section of Edinburgh. But we have to learn those practical lessons, and I think some of those are important probably to share today, both from a sort of experience for other landowners, but also from a policy perspective. And also, you know, we have to pay the bills. I mean, this is a project that we believe will deliver long-term value to us, but you've got to see your way through to the point where you are obtaining that value. You can't carry on as a charitable venture. So just a few words on some of those challenges, and you might legitimately say, well, they would have been obvious before you started, but anyway, we'll just be honest about it. You won't be surprised to know that getting planning permission is an extremely onerous task. It is eye-wateringly expensive. It takes an enormously long time. We'd spent £5 million before anybody got a digger on the site. And as John said, that's on a site where you had 50 letters of objection, you had wide local support for the project. And some of that feels like a process where the easiest answer for those that are delivering the permission is to say, I don't know yet, can you give me some more information on that? You know, the vast majority of that cost went on the environmental impact assessment on a site that had no real environmental challenges. And that's all money. In our case, we didn't have a particularly risky planning environment. So it didn't feel like it was a gamble per se in that you might not get planning permission. But that is still money that could have been spent on beauty, and it's spent on process, and there's a lot more of that spent than there needs to be. And we don't see a benefit for that now. Because each time we come forward with a sub-phase, it remains a complex and well designed and thoughtful process. A lot of it is new. It isn't something that the planners saw in the last sub-phase application. And as a result, you go through the whole process all over again, arguing with the roads teams, worrying about this, worrying about that. So rather than speeding our way through the next stage of planning, it seems to be making it slower. And that can't be right. I got terribly excited in Cornwall yesterday to learn about LDOs because I thought I want one of those. You know, if we determine our own planning application, this is going to be a lot quicker. In our part of the world, this is probably much less of a concern here, but we're in a relatively low-value part of the world. So at the moment, our average selling price is about £215 to £220 a foot. It started at 185 2 years ago, so we're definitely heading in the right direction. But delivering what we're delivering, Simon's sort of going, yeah. One of our directors worried about the money. At 215 to 220 pounds a foot, it is a real struggle. So, you know, we need rising property values, which is not something that politicians want to hear. You know, if you want to deliver beauty, beauty comes at a cost, particularly if you're paying for all that infrastructure as well. Build costs, if you've got somebody like Ben on board, delivering beauty is actually quite easy because he's very, very good at that. But delivering it very cost effectively is an altogether different challenge, which is something that we're spending a lot of time looking at it. Infrastructure, I just don't know where to start. The system is incoherent, it's dysfunctional, it's difficult to plan long term. For policy development, if you want to support the kind of projects like Poundbury or Nansledden or Tornagrain, then some assistance in delivering that infrastructure, even if it's paid back later, is going to help reduce risk, encourage the landowners to sort of get involved in that kind of delivery model because you are waiting longer for your money, and it's going to speed up the supply of the right kind of housing. The low carbon agenda, we all know that it's important. It's going to be a design and a physical challenge. You know, the move to electrification is a big challenge for house builders, whether you're trying to do what we're doing or you're a volume builder. And also there's that technological uncertainty about which direction are we going. Is it going to be hydrogen coming through pipes? Is it going to be electrification? You're trying to make long-term decisions and nobody's really sure what's going to happen. And of course, the big challenge for us as a business is that it's a long horizon to the point that you start seeing black ink, not red ink. We started this project in earnest in 2004, and it'll take 25 years before it starts feeling comfortable. Now, if you think about that, that's one of the... okay, we're a low-value part of the country, so it would be quicker in other parts. But then, we talked to Peter at the Duchy yesterday. These are long time horizon projects that require patience, and that's where I think that perhaps the state, if it really wants to see these things happen, could provide some of the assistance to de-risk that with infrastructure. Now, it's important that we learn from our lessons, so we're spending a lot of time focusing on how we can deliver Ben's Beauty as cost effectively as possible without diminishing the value of the product. We're taking a long-term stake in the community itself, as John said, so we're keeping all the commercial. We're looking at how we can deliver some of that affordable, because otherwise there's a risk you're just giving away that property at the start and somebody else will benefit from it later. So you may as well keep that on board. And eventually, if we get terribly bold, I hardly dare mention this in front of some of our directors, maybe we take a more direct role in the future in the delivery of the housing itself, because we do have 2 house builders on site, and it may be that we see a way to deliver value by becoming more involved in that. I've mentioned how I think government could help with infrastructure and make that place more, or that process easier. I think there's still a lot to be seen. Certainly north of the border, we don't see planning authorities delivering through on their own policy agenda properly, particularly on a roads point of view. Roads engineers are taking a long time to reprogram. So if somebody could just flick that switch a little bit further, that would make life a lot easier. And government agencies just don't talk to each other. We've got 3 government agencies where we're dealing with stormwater, and they have contradictory objectives, and they're arguing amongst themselves, and you're trying to plot a path through the middle, which is extremely difficult. Anyway, enough of my practical moaning. John's going to sort of conclude with a few final observations.
Yeah, it was just all to do with the community that that's developing there. We were wondering if we should be doing more to foster a sense of community ourselves, more than beyond just providing a great canvas. And people say, no, don't. That'll happen. If you've created this wonderful framework, the community will form itself. And sure enough, last year, the community got together and had a great big party. And that's Malvina, 1 or 2 other little glimpses. So there it was. I don't know how one defines life's highlights, but being invited along to that and seeing everybody having just a really fantastic time. It started at 12 and went on till 4 o'clock the next morning. It was just unbelievably rewarding, I have to say. There's meant to be a little video, but it might not. Anyway, but that gives an idea of just what a great day it was, with music and banter and barbecues. Thank you very much.